Hi, Sally Foley-Lewis here, and we have another episode of the Spark series, talking to amazing senior leaders about how to fire up your courage, your influence, and your confidence through self-leadership. And today I have the absolute honour and privilege of speaking to Andrew Short, who is the Assistant Commissioner for, let me get this right, Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. I'm an ex-public servant myself, so sometimes you've got to double check the department name because they can change in a minute sometimes.
They can, but I don't get too bothered by those misrepresentation moments.
That's good. You get to wear a uniform, and I think that helps a lot too. So,
well, it makes it easy for what you got to choose to wear in the morning.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. I'm delighted that we're about to go down the rabbit hole of self-leadership and really appreciate your time. So let's just jump in. What do you think self-leadership is?
Now, if you asked me this question 5 or 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, I would have given you a very different answer. And I think what's happened for me, I see a lot of good leaders who end up in this space where they realise that having a handle on self-leadership or having a handle on leading self ends up being the centre point for virtually everything that builds off it. And it's really interesting watching people who are on that journey, some down lower on the continuum, others up a lot higher. And what I've found is that you end up observing people on that journey. And when you see moments where maybe they're not showing the self-awareness that you would like to see in a leader, I'm less critical now of that. I kind of go, well, clearly they're on a bit of a journey. So for me, it's there's an expression, and I'm not going to try to remember who said it, but there are two things that are hard as diamonds, and one is a diamond, and the other one is knowing yourself. So that really is the key here. That it doesn't come easy, and people got to go through a lot of structured and informal learning experiences, feedback loops, which can be really quite harsh to actually get yourself to that point where you actually start to become self-aware.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the delivery of such feedback can impede the awareness piece of that too, can't it, at times?
Oh, well, you see it where if you say something to someone that puts a gap between their own awareness of a situation involving themselves and what maybe a third party or other parties are seeing, they talk about that as being the gap in awareness. And it's pretty scary sometimes. It's pretty scary for people who some people whose nature can actually have people hesitate giving them direct feedback. So they go through a period of either organisational life or personal life where they probably think they're doing really well because they don't get too much feedback, and it's because people probably don't feel comfortable in giving the feedback. But when people start working on that and actually let them have some feedback, be it right, wrong, or indifferent, it can be really a moment for that person. It can actually be a moment of change for them, and it can come in many ways.
Yeah, definitely. It's a sliding doors moment in a lot of ways, isn't it? Because depending on where your level of self-awareness and self-belief and confidence is, when that feedback comes in, you can either accept it graciously or otherwise. And it can be one of those things where and feedback is just feedback. It's information, and you have a choice about what you do with it. But when it's about your own development, your own leadership, your own, self-awareness, and it's intended to be helpful, I think one of the things that, where we're at can also dictate how well we receive it, Yeah,
a bit where we are in our life. And sometimes that sliding door's open, and other times that door is absolutely shut. I would have to say, if we're going to talk about self-awareness or awareness of self, I find that I can't have this conversation with either colleagues or family or friends, particularly when they engage, because I don't go around preaching and lecturing. I try to avoid that. However, people do want to have that chat sometimes, and I end up talking about ego, generally speaking, as a part of that conversation. And I say that as someone who, if I get some feedback, and probably whether today or yesterday it would have happened for me, it can actually sting, because, as I said, it puts a gap between your view on something and another view. And the expression which comes to mind on that one is that sometimes your ego is not your amigo, meaning that your ego, even though it's trying to protect you and maintain a somewhat inward-looking perspective on you, can actually blind you to the things that you should be seeing. So it's a real personal journey.
Oh, totally agree with that. Yeah, definitely. So with that in mind, what impact do you think self-leadership has on parts of us, like our confidence and our ability to influence and our courage to speak up or stand up in certain situations?
First, I need to describe a model that we're using currently, which talks about how there's self-leadership, and then that by having the right amount of that, then you can be better at leading others. And when you start leading others, you start moving at some of those points you raised about influence and communication and relationship. And only then can you become part of a team that's leading an organization. So that's the hierarchy. And leading self or leadership of self is the foundation. It's the base. I've seen examples of being there myself, the earlier version of myself, who maybe was not self-aware as I am now, and believe me, I'll say it up front that I don't think it's a bit of work that any of us get to the end of, because all of a sudden we're involved in a situation where you think your reaction to something, you reflect and go, gee, I thought I was better than that. However, we're all humans, and we all get to have good days, bad days, where there's an expression how we're a chemical cocktail, and any part of the day we may react differently to things. So I think leadership of self, for me, a big part of it is not that you're going to be good all the time. It's that you're aware that there are times where you may need to step away from something because you're not in the right frame of mind to be able to actually do that. And that's something that I personally work on. I think I've gotten a bit better at in not reacting directly to something which is being said or an action. There are times where you need to give yourself time to process it. So I think as you get better at this stuff, you get better, not in the sense that you become perfect or you become able to control things better, including yourself. I think you become better at using the tools and taking the choices around the different moments. My summary.
Yeah, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you, what I'm hearing is that you get more discerning about how you're going to respond to certain situations, and even the courage that when you're not feeling quite so good about something, it's the courage to say no, or the courage to not respond, or the courage to not have to keep going and stepping up when in actual fact someone else could have that opportunity to step up. You may actually be doing the situation a service by holding back, and and not being so reactionary. And I think it's the courage to hold rather than react, I think is one of the things that I'm hearing you say.
And what goes along with that is the notion of authentic leadership, where you give yourself those moments that maybe you're not in the right space. And really high functioning teams, my experience has been the team itself knows where the individuals are, and really positive, proactive team behaviour will actually scrum at the right moment. If someone's having a bad day who would normally do a certain role, they actually form a solution where they actually help that person. And I've got to say, when those moments play out, they're absolutely wonderful. because all of a sudden you get to bypass either a pothole or a disaster, because the team has been able to be conscious of the many parts in the team, the individuals who are living their lives, having good days, having bad days. And it's wonderful when it works. And conversely, when teams are not aware of how people are doing within them, then I've seen some examples, probably being party to it, where it becomes a train wreck.
Yeah, and it sounds, trust is the word I'm hearing underpinning all of that. In that when we are okay in ourselves and we've got that level of ego in check, and we have the confidence in ourselves to be able to encourage to say, I'm not okay, there also is that point at which there's trust in the team, or not. But as the example you said first, when there's trust in the team, then they do rally and together we work as one to get through the scenario. Or conversely, when there isn't trust, or trust is broken, I mean, that becomes a mess, really. It's
tough yards when there's a fracture or indeed a break in the trust element of the team. As I watch developing leaders, and this is something that I've become a lot more interested. I think as you go through your career, and whether I'm in an emergency service or whether I was doing another business, I think my nature would have resulted that I'd be interested anyway. For our people, though, I'm always looking for them to be at their best, and this kind of goes against some of the older thinking, which was it's all about making the boss look good. Whereas the contemporary thinking is try to set people up for a win. And in the context of the discussion we're having, that means maybe having a discussion with someone that they're not quite ready yet for that situation. And that's opportunity challenge may actually result in them sliding, to use the beachhead analogy, being pushed back into the ocean. So it's interesting watching people come on. They're all coming on at their own different speed. Some of them have got their mind and ears open. They're seeing things in themselves that others see. Others are not quite there. And so we know that any effort that we put into the people to let them actually understand who they are, and there's so many different ways how you can do that. There's different psych tools and personality devices, and there are lovers and haters of that stuff, and it can really polarize. But I find that if people are going to take it as a slice or a keyhole look at who they might be, I actually encourage it. And I've seen people go through some of these assessment tools, whether it be Myers-Briggs or brain dominance or whatever. And it's quite interesting to watch people, how they absorb that feedback that they get from one mechanism. But certainly, going back to your earlier point, I think the golden standard here is having a team who are so high trust that the feedback mechanism is delivered objectively without fear or favour sometimes, because if it's high trust, people are going to aware that that the truth being put in their face, but that's not always available. So you're moving a range of chess pieces here to make this work.
And we're dealing with humans, so we've got to sometimes meet people where they're at, and I think it's really important that as leaders, especially if we've got to be mindful of where our team is at, and then maybe having those self-leadership conversations. It's around where's this person at right now, and if I pushed, would that be helping or hindering? And I'm with you on the assessment pieces. There's some really good ones out there, and there's some other ones, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of there's information in there. And to me, the most important piece around these assessments is actually in the debrief. I just had a conversation with someone recently, a leader of a team. They did an assessment, but no one debriefed it with them. And so they're just sitting there going, well, this person does this according to this assessment, and I'm this particular style. And I was listening to them talk, and I said, have you done a debrief? Did the person you did this with debrief this with you? And the leader said no. And I said, right, that's our issue, because you don't know how to then unpack and interpret and apply these concepts and have conversations around how these impact you as a team and as your individual contributions to the team. So in terms of individuals and their self-leadership. So I think
it can really confuse people.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen that too.
Yeah.
It can affect people to a degree where they start to really question even good parts of themselves. That's how, I agree, the structured debrief by a practitioner who's actually skilled can actually help that. I'm always very mindful of saying to people, this is not who you are, this is how you think, because people tend to want to, go back to the core person, and there's not too many people, I'm talking, scientists, educationalists that go back who have or will ever be able to map the human being. We can map, the genome, but we can't map individuals. And I was going to say earlier, you reminded me that I continue to see management science try to turn human beings into widgets.
Yeah.
And to think that this organisation or this part of the organisation will work if we have this structure and this person reporting to this person, and we have this blueprint. And certainly these are all good tools. However, the human sometimes gets lost in this. And my experience has been that when things are all going bad, it's human nature in its best demonstration is what brings organisations or teams through a moment. And,
yeah, definitely.
And I'm always saying to people that keep humans at the centre of it. I'm very mindful of having a view that you got to accept that humans are going to fail you. Even people who, and I'm not saying fail deliberately or maliciously, I'm just saying that they're going to have a bad day, or they're going to miss something that they, your ego will say, if I did it, I wouldn't have missed it, and all the crap that goes on. They're going to have a bad day, and we got to be very mindful of that, because it makes it a little bit easier. I think one of the things that happened for me as I became a senior leader was once I accepted that all people get to have a bad day, or all people get to have the occasional mistake, and will do so. It actually gets a little bit easier, because you're not being disappointed by having yourself in this false world. That things should be better than they are.
And our expectations are managed much better too, aren't they? And I think that's a really critical piece of that connection between how I see myself and forgiveness when I make a mistake, and what I'm going to do about it when I make a mistake, and the kindness that I can bring to myself. If I apply that to others as well, then my expectations are actually quite rational and realistic. And I think that also, if that shows up in our behavior, then we're going to be someone that others will feel safe to be around, to admit a mistake, to say, help me, I've made a mistake. Look, I made a mistake. This is how I fixed it. Do you think I did the right thing? And that makes the distance from error to resolution much shorter then, as opposed to any other environment where people are too scared to speak up, and they sweep it under the carpet, try and hide it, or have their Teflon coat on, So I think,
or carry it with them, even though the other people have actually moved on.
Yes,
it's quite interesting. I think I need to just mention here that notion of judging self versus judging others, and I do see this, and I've probably done it myself, when human nature is that when we see another person do something that we don't agree with or don't like, or whether we actually end up, we judge them on their behaviour.
Yes.
Whereas when we spin it round, conveniently, we judge ourselves on our intention. So you probably Sally, have heard that before. It's true, dead set. And I say that being someone who does it. So got to keep, and this is going back to where we started, leadership of self.
Yeah.
There are times where I want to go, oh, come on, Andrew, get back to reality here. They've done nothing different to what you've done yourself 100 times. Yeah. And so, when I have that dialogue, I try to make it seem that I'm not talking to myself, because that might, raise some eyebrows. But that's that sort of narrative, that dialogue that's going on in your mind all the time, that we all have, all of us.
Oh yeah, we all have self-talk, definitely. Yeah. So let me ask you this: has there been some sort of an event, or maybe there was an event? You don't really need to share the event. That choice is yours. But been a time where you've had to reignite your own spark, particularly around self-leadership. What did you do to be able to spark yourself up and fire yourself back up again? And maybe some of the lessons around that.
Yeah, the one that stands out to my mind is the nature of the roles that we're in. They're we all serve at the pleasure of our commissioner, and so there are times where you might get moved to a role, a different portfolio. And certainly for me, coming out of one portfolio, going into another, that was a period of change for me, because I felt like I hadn't quite finished what I had set about to achieve. But we don't, like life, we don't have control of everything. And I found that I think what helped me through that, it didn't happen quickly, but what helped me was I had to recalibrate my why. And I've learned, this is one of the things in life that I've learned, that if I'm not clear in my mind about the why of why I'm doing something, or why I'm leading a team about something, or why am I trying to improve this portfolio or provide better service to these people, if I'm not clear in that my mind, then that's where I'm likely to wander, or just stray away to a place where you're you don't have the drive that you need to have as a senior person in an organisation, and you don't have the focus that you need to. So my the lesson, and I could have talked more about the roles, but probably not a great benefit, but the role that I came out of was heavily invested in culture change, and something which to this day is still very important to me. Having felt like being able to move some things, but still other things, hadn't moved them an inch. And so therefore, I found myself, what's that? There's a nice little book. If I turn around my bookshelf, I could probably find it. That book titled "Who Moved My Cheese," which is not a new book, but it's essentially a book which helps people to refocus and recalibrate. So I think there's a lot of knowledge in this space, and people don't need to have all the answers. None of us need to have all the answers. That's the beauty of life. There's so much support around us, whether it be literature, whether it be a network, whether it be a trusted mentor, that we'll get ourselves in trouble when we don't use those connections into something. And an example would be, I've probably got half a dozen books that if I'm in a certain situation or a certain quandary, I'll go back to that book because it will recenter me. It will, it might be a simply, we all sometimes get in the situation where we feel like we're dealing with the most horrible situation in the world, and then you kind of give yourself a bit of a wake up, and you realise that a lot of other people out there are doing it a lot tougher. So to try to regather your perspective, and that's one example. But there's many where there are things that you can do to actually help yourself get back on the rail. And I think any change in life, whether it be a work change or a personal change, you see this in relationship changes. People wander for a while because they're a bit lost. And my advice is always, use the wide range of tools that are available for you.
And I guess if you're feeling that little bit of isolated, there can be that little bit of period, like you said, meandering, but we do have a lot around us where maybe there's a bit of overwhelm as to where do I go back to. That may be an experience for people. And Who Moved My Cheese is such a classic book. You know, his kids wrote a sequel.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so not that long ago, actually. So yeah, there's a sequel to the book. So yeah.
Is it the same theme or?
Oh yeah, it's the continuing saga of him and Hawaii. So yeah. So how do you help your people fire up their self-leadership?
I think empowerment sits at the center of that for me, and what goes along with that is trust.
Yeah.
So I think that aspect is something that comes very naturally to me, which I think my people, current team, previous teams who I've worked, who work for me and with me, and I'm very you'd see I'm very careful about that language that I use. So I think if your people realise that they're safe, to use that term you used before, and that they can make a mistake, they're more likely to be a bit bolder in trying to find a better solution. So I think empowerment probably sits at the center of that for me. But if you don't have that trust either being built or having already been built, then you're going to have people who are trying to be empowered, but they're looking over their shoulder because they're just a little bit unsure, and maybe they've been burnt before, and people, as we all know, carry stuff with us. So that works for me, and I should say that for every good thing that I think I give my team or the people I work with, there are probably a long list of things that I know that I drive them crazy on. So I just need to put that on the record here, and so I don't promote myself as being a perfect leader, because I'm not.
Nice disclaimer there, Andrew. Yeah, but that's owning it, isn't it? I mean, what you just said then is the total bit about going, I'm not perfect, and I'm sure I annoy someone. And I think that to me is an example of self-leadership in action. It's as much as we may want the world to love us and like us and accept us as who we are, the reality is I grate on someone and someone grates on me. And that actually makes the world a pretty interesting place, It does. And going back to our earlier comments about leadership of self or leading self, I think once you start to understand and be comfortable that you're going to have people out there who, if they could find a little doll and a few pins, they'd be sticking those pins in, because you clearly either on a different place to where they are, you may have offended them. But I think accepting that that's going to happen. I'm not saying advocate that, and this is where the people out there, and there are people out there who are so oblivious to the impact they have on people. And those people generally lie up the narcissist end of the spectrum. You don't want that, but you've got to be there in the middle somewhere, accepting that you're going to be disliked. And when I get asked a question from people who are seeking to promote or take on a more senior responsible role, and it could be not just in an organisation, it could be in a volunteer capacity on a weekend, or in a sporting team, managing a sporting team, or whatever, that the sooner they understand that what comes with that sort of, not glory, because it's not glory, but what comes with it is the need to disappoint people. And I think being able to say no to someone and know that they're going to not like it, the sooner you get comfortable with that stuff, the better your mental health is going to be. It still stings, and for a person of my nature, it does sting me. But I've learnt that I have to do it, and I don't always do it well. You kind of stumble over it, and you kind of get through the best you can. But I think
knowing that you're going to disappoint someone is quite important. There's a really, it's a quirky expression, and I don't believe it, but I do think it's corny, in that people thinking that leadership is the ability to disappoint someone at a level that they can cope with. It's
right. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I don't believe that, but certainly it probably speaks. It speaks to the notion of that you got to develop skills so that in you delivering that negative message or whatever, that you're not going to destroy the soul.
Yeah, and you can see where that line or that cliche comes from, can't you? And that comes back to also understanding that, like you said, it's about understanding that you will be disappointing somebody at some stage, and more than once probably, and then it's about, okay, I've got to get to some level of acceptance of this. I don't have to like it, but I have to know that happens. And then I also have to, if I'm anything in my own leadership, and if I'm anything of any salt in my worth, then I will do my best to make sure that I'm delivering that disappointment in the least painful way possible. And I think I'm like you a little bit, Andrew, that I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and so I stumble over it and I crumble over it, and it's never a negative intent, but it's how do we constantly find ways to make sure that when we are delivering disappointment, we do it with dignity and respect, and with the least amount of pain possible. So yeah, interesting.
And certainly, whilst always difficult, I think it's accepted that you've got to be able to do it. And there's that lovely little scene in Apollo 11 where the Tom Hanks character, he tells his mate that he's not going to make the trip, and he could have drifted into blaming a third party or blaming others for it, but he didn't do that. He said, "This in the end, it was my decision." And I think owning your decisions goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, metaphor for that piece. I mean, I don't remember most of the movie, but as soon as you said that moment, I remember that scene. So yeah, that's a really strong, powerful call there. So thank you. So I've got one more question for you, Andrew, and that is, what is the one thing you wish you knew about self-leadership when you first stepped into your first leadership, first management, like shifting from individual contributor to people manager? What's the one thing you knew about self-leadership back then?
I wish I knew that I'm the only one who sees things the way I see it. Because that is the lesson that I've learnt the hard way. And this it's almost an ignorance that you believe, you're so clear in your mind that you believe in something, and then you become a bit indignant about, well, why doesn't everyone else see it the same way? Whereas the reality is, you have 10 people in a room, 10 people are going to see things slightly different. Now, most of them might agree generally, but no one is exactly on the same money. And I wish I had learnt that earlier in my time.
That's powerful. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So any last words you want to share before we wrap up our Spark chat?
I'd just say to anyone who's listening that if it feels hard as you work on yourself, that means you're having a go, and means that you're continuing to expose yourself to discomfort. That goes with growth. And whereas the easy way, the road less traveled, to use that, the road less traveled it comes with a cost. But I think we all benefit from it down the track, and the objective being that we're a slightly better person each year that passes.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. So, Andrew Short, the Assistant Commissioner for the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, thank you very much for your time and your wisdom and your insights. I really appreciate that. Lots to think about, lots of gold there, and really, really value that not everyone's going to see it my way. I think yeah, that resonates with me a lot actually. So, thank you so much.
And if you don't mind, Sally, I'm going to do a little plug here and say that people will find me on LinkedIn, and you'll find a link to a series of podcasts I do about leadership, and it will be great for anyone if you're on the journey to jump on there, and you could even pick a topic that you think is applicable to you right now in your life, either professional life or personal life. But that's my contribution to the profession of leadership. So, Sally, thank you very much for the invitation to come on, and I did have a quick look at the other work you've done, and it's really good work. And,
thank you,
and thank you for the contribution you're making to maybe making leadership journeys just a little bit easier than they might have been.
Thank you so much. Now, what's the name of your podcast?
It's actually titled "Influence Me."
Okay.
So it's a play on that leadership is all about influence, and also influencing yourself in the choices you make. And you can get it on Podbean or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So
and the link will go with this. We'll make sure the link's in with this as well.
Thank you very much, Sally.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Because the other thing I should say is that part of the reason I do the podcast, maybe this might be the same for you, I don't know, it's actually your own development. And doing it and having these discussions with people, you actually get
my secrets.
You do. You get clearer in your own mind about things, or you confront previous views or thoughts that you had, and you shift. And I think it's wonderful watching people shift in their life in terms of their attitudes and views, because that to me is maturing. And I'm not saying that any of us get to be wise in the true sense. But you get to be a little bit wiser than you used to be. But anyway, back to you, Sally. Thank you very much.
Oh, Andrew, thank you.